So hi, everyone. I'm Max. Thank you so much for coming to this event. It is hosted by Roadmap, which is an exclusive product community really focused on just making sure that the members themselves are bona fide PMs and product nerds, and then facilitating networking and interactions throughout the group. Yeah, this is part of a ongoing event series where we bring in speakers from within the Roadmap community to talk on topics that are in high demand by other members and that they can speak to very well. Yeah, this one was about mentorship. And so we were lucky enough to have BJ be our moderator, and then bring in two kind of like later career product experts who've done quite a bit of mentoring themselves, as well as kind of mid and earlier career folks who have both been mentors but also sought mentors of their own. So we're just going to sort of talk through what that all looks like and how you can get a great product mentor too. But anyway, thank you all for coming, and hope you enjoy the event.
Welcome, everybody. My name is BJ Hillabush. I'm going to be your moderator for today. My background is product management and product coaching, and I thought it'd be great to kind of kick it off with some intros. So if you're okay with it, I'm going to start with our mentors today. So Garrett, would you be willing to give us a little intro, a little background before we kick off?
I'm a product manager at Figma. I lead the prototyping team at Figma, which is largely focused on prototyping, but Figma is kind of a company that has a lot of platform. We kind of use the machine in a lot of different ways. So prototyping also powers our slides product. And so I do a lot of platformy type work there. Before Figma, I was a software engineer for most of my career, actually. I was at Slack, Mapbox, and Opower, all little startups, mostly doing front-end engineering. And I kind of backed into product management by going from engineering to engineering management. And at Slack, I was doing a hybrid engineering management product. So that's been my my career path.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Excited to hear more about how you made that transition. So we'll definitely dig in there. Awesome. Our other mentor is Phil. You want to kick us off with an intro?
Sure. Yeah, I'm been in product management for, I don't know, ever 15, 20 years, something like that. Like Garrett, I started as a software engineer and kind of fell into it and loved it. I've worked and built teams, strategies, product visions, from large corporations, such as Nike, Turner Broadcasting, the Weather Channel, all the way down through smaller, startups. I've done a number of startups in fintech and healthcare. My most recent gig was with a data science, data security company called Anaconda.
Awesome. Very cool. All right. And then we specifically asked two mentees to join us today. So Patrick, you want to kick us off with an intro?
Yeah, my name is Patrick Mart. I'm a senior product manager at a startup called Skimmer. Prior to that, I worked in two other vertical SaaS softwares as product managers, but I came to product management from operations and logistics. I've been in product management for just about 4 years now.
Awesome. And then Kayla.
I'm Kayla. So I'm a product manager as well. I work at a company called Viva Systems. So we build a platform for life sciences. I've been in product for 5 years. I transitioned from system engineering, and I'm super happy to talk as a mentee or a mentor. So super passionate about this area. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right. So I want to start first with our mentors. And the goal of this question is for everybody to get a little bit of an understanding about you, why you do mentoring, what has been your motivation. Because obviously you're busy, you've got a lot going on your plate. So we'd love to understand a little bit more about why you take the time. Why is it something that's valuable to you? So maybe we'll kick it off with Phil.
Wow. It's such an innate feeling of mentoring. Honestly, it's one of those things where it feels good and it's rewarding. And I think, as I mentioned in my intro, I've built teams and grown, visions and things. But one of the things I love to see is watch people grow and mature into different roles, pick up new skills, accomplish things. It's similar, outside of my professional life. I volunteer with youth groups, and it's a very similar type of feeling, right? Watching people acquire new skills. And there's always, I'd be remiss if I didn't also just throw out there, there's always, hey, it's nice to know people in the community, right? Because what I hope is that, anybody that I'm working with as a mentee is someone who grows and moves. I don't know, necessarily want them to move away from me or move out of the company I'm working with or whatever, but I want them to move and follow their own path. And I want to have, connections through the community. I mean, that's kind of a selfish goal, but at the end of the day, it's really just an innate sense of it feels good. I mean,
Yeah, that's awesome. How about you, Garrett? Anything you'd add to that?
No, I very, very much agree. I mean, I think I started mentoring largely because I feel like I've gotten lucky many times in my life just through random points of like either privilege or position or just honestly like being able to interact and get along with people. Like that's a huge advantage. And I think especially being on the engineering side, I saw a lot of like opportunity for helping folks who didn't necessarily have those skills. Be like, here's a good way of like, you're right, you're functionally right, and there's opportunities there. So for me, it's partly like, this person could just like there's an opportunity that they're missing because it's just like there's a message delivery or there could be any number of things. So a lot of it is partly like there's a problem that you're capable of helping with, and why not. I think often Phil, you mentioned too, just like there is a selfish thing, but I think it's also just a very human thing that like the people you work with are the people that you often like build these relationships with that can circle back and surprise you in a lot of different ways. I think people that I've mentored have gone on to do unexpected careers in places that I won't ever get to, and it's very fun to watch that. But also to know that like there's times when you can be helpful to those people again too. And so I see mentorship as really a two-way relationship. And I think finally the last selfish thing I said, and I've said this to Max too, is like I think when you mentor, you also get a chance to like look inside someone else's brain and someone else's work. And I find that stuff like just structurally interesting. It's very interesting to think about like how do you solve problems and or within organizations. So there's all this, there's a lot of interesting stuff within mentorship that you learn just from like having conversations with people.
If I could add just one piece to that,
Yeah.
that just made me think of the idea that I often learn more by teaching.
Mm-hmm.
But I do, and that's it's just a nice way to learn and learn new aspects of similar skills again and again.
That's great. So Kayla, I know you obviously on this call as a mentor, but I know you're doing some mentoring. Is there anything you would add kind of from your perspective?
I think Phil and Garrett nailed it. It feels really rewarding to be able to help someone in their journey. I think one of the amazing things about mentorship and why I do it is I wish someone did it for me. I feel I wasted so much time, or I just like I tripped up over my own feet over things that I was too shy or too nervous to ask, where if I'd made myself vulnerable with someone and kind of was like, hey, I'm really struggling, like how can I structure this, or is this really important, do I need to focus on this, like I could have saved myself so much time. Like you don't make something or follow a recipe without actually following the recipe. And sometimes in our career, I sometimes think our ego gets in the way where we're afraid to look stupid. So yeah, I think mentorship's amazing. It's really helped me in my career, and I wish that I started it earlier. So I want to be able to help, and I do it myself now with people that I reach out to.
Awesome. How about you, Patrick? Anything that you'd add to that?
Sure. I'll try to add. I will have to say selfishly, I've never been a mentor in a like formal capacity. I am blessed to have had two mentors that got me to where I am. So I apologize to anyone who has never had a mentor that I've taken two out of the market. But I also do think like one of the main reasons that I had mentors was because they had mentors. So I do also feel that burden that like it is something that you got to pay forward. And I acknowledge that like at some point I need to keep imparting the wisdom and guidance that was given to me. But yeah, I think it's really great that there's people in this community, communities like Roadmap that offer both more experienced mentorship, but also like peer mentorship is something that exists where it's like they don't necessarily need to be much further along in your career. They may even be in the same stage of your career, but just being a peer to them, there is a camaraderie and mentorship that can happen. just by collaborating through experiences that you've done. And I definitely have like friends that are also in the tech field, maybe not in product management. Some of them are developers or designers that I've spoken with, and we've together grown without it being like such a top-down mentorship level.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm going to keep picking on you. I'm going to switch the conversation to the mentees. One of the most common questions that we get, I know Max got this in roadmap, I definitely get it in product coaching, is how do I find a mentor? So you've done it twice successfully now, Patrick. You've stolen these coaches off the market. How did you approach them? What did you do? What was your secret? Is there anything you'd offer to the community on how best to approach a mentor?
Yeah. So partially luck. I will just fully acknowledge that part of this is just luck. My first mentor was the mentor that helped get me into product management. So I was working in operations and logistics and knew I wanted to get into product management and had no idea how. And it is a little bit like you would anything else. You start with people you know in your network. And I was looking for someone who could give me advice on product management. And I actually went to a childhood friend's dad. He had been a CEO at tech companies. And I was like, hey, when I was 12, I slept on your couch. Do you remember me? Messaged him on LinkedIn. And I was like, look, I'm trying to do this thing. Like, can you help? And full transparency, he was a CEO. He was never a product guy. He's like, I don't know if I can, but I mentored this gentleman who was my first mentor, who was a product manager, is a director of product. Why don't I put you in contact with him? And that was the first, like I was talking about, getting passed down. He had mentored him early in his career. And when I reached out to him through that interaction, through that, kind of a warm call intro, he was willing to pay it forward to me. So I own that vibe, or that pay forward. I've got that one. And then once I actually got into product management, I was just really lucky, again, that my first boss just had that mentorship bug in him, and was willing to invest in his people. And I just happened to be one of his people. And so being open to say, I know I have a lot to learn and I want to learn it. I know as little as I can realize that I know, and there's a whole world of things I know I don't know. And just trying to be open and reaching out, and a little bit of just being vulnerable. Like, I know there's things I want to learn. Will you teach me? And just taking what they get on their terms, right? Like, as a mentee, it's really tempting to be like, can you just give me all of these answers? Can you just tell me what I want to know? And that's generally not how it works. It's generally a guiding principle that's sometimes frustrating. Sometimes, you just want the answer. Just tell me the right thing. And it just doesn't work that way. And you have to be ready to put in the work more than the mentor, because that's probably the best way. And I'll let the mentor speak to that. To get a mentor to stop talking to you is if they're putting in more work than you are. It's your job to reach out. It's your job to tell them things you need to talk about. It's your job to set meetings. They're giving you time that they don't have to. So every minute you get from them, you've got to double down on and do just as much work outside of the amount of time.
Awesome. I know you talked a lot about, this being luck, but I think there were 3 pretty big takeaways, and I'll give the mentors a chance. But I think 1, you demonstrated a willingness to be humble and teachable. I think you took the risk in actually reaching out. And then I think there's a clear point, which I'm sure we'll hear about, is you were willing to do the work and value the time that people were offering. So I think those are some cool takeaways. How about you, Kayla? How have you approached getting mentors? Anything you'd add to that?
So how I've had a lot of mentorship in my career, I'm very lucky that it's been organic, or it's been me reaching out to someone on LinkedIn being, hey, I'm really interested in how you did this. Would you be open to a 20-minute conversation? I don't think I've ever actually approached someone to be like, will you be my mentor? And it be so formal. It's just kind of evolved, or we've really hit it off and we had a great discussion. And it was like, hey, would you mind if I reached out to you again in the future? And sometimes people are like, oh, my schedule's crazy. And that's kind of, you have to go on their terms, or yeah, no problem, Kayla, reach out anytime. I would also say I've been very lucky that I've had a lot of cross-functional mentorship. Like some of my biggest mentors in my career have been people who are like a head of sales or someone who's a lead in marketing, and just understanding their perspective and maybe how I was able to articulate something or where I wasn't able to articulate something successfully, and just being open to that and not being critical on myself, I think has been really helpful for me in getting that, just being a better product manager myself.
That's awesome. I love that idea of kind of the cross-functional. So to follow up on this question, I'm curious how you guys have structured. So I know a little bit about your backgrounds. I know you guys are in very different environments. So Kayla, you said a lot of these have been more organic. Has there been any specific structure that this mentorship has gone through? Maybe a certain cadence or a way that you've interacted across the different mentors that you work with, or even one that you prefer?
I'm definitely not organized enough to say like every 3 months I always meet with Garrett. It's been organic, or it's something where it's like, oh shoot, like this came up, like I really want to like talk to this about something, and it's kind of for cause, which isn't a bad thing, because I think like Phil or Patrick mentioned this, where it's really the onus is on the mentee to drive the agenda. If I'm using your time, you're really busy, I want to make sure that I have a specific area where I'm seeking your guidance, where you can help me or you can give me more things to think about, instead of it just being like, hey, how's it going? I think we're all really busy. We like it to be tactical, and then everyone feels fulfilled because then you were able to help me solve a problem, etc.
So what you're saying is that as a bunch of product managers, we want a clear problem to solve?
I know, crazy, right?
Right, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
How about you, Patrick? Anything to add?
Yeah, I would agree that it usually starts somewhat organic. Starting with a conversation around a problem, right? My first mentor, it was very clear. Like I was trying to get into product management, and I was asking, what do you think of these certifications? Which ones does the industry value right now? Where should I be like spending my time to do this? And so like a very clear problem to solve. So yes, I agree that it helps to be that way. And then keeping a regular cadence is nice, but also acknowledging that, especially if it's somebody that's outside of your company or outside of like your regular sphere, sometimes a regular cadence becomes email them regularly, and then I email them once a quarter, and then we talk, every so often. I am also fortunate enough to have a mentor that's in my company, which makes it much easier, because then it's regular lunch, like, hey, this is going on, can we go grab coffee? More impromptu. So there's obviously a benefit to have someone in the company at all times.
Awesome. All right, I'll go to the mentors. Maybe Garrett, to follow up on this conversation, what is your preferred structure as a mentor? When somebody's approaching you, what are you looking for? What do you hope? And how do you try to structure those relationships?
Yeah. It's a really good question. I think, Patrick, you're kind of talking about one big important point here, which is like mentorship of a coworker versus mentorship like outside. And I think they are different structures. And I think you're right. Like one, absolutely correct. It's way harder to schedule because calendars are a black box. But also like structurally, like the type of mentorship and the type of thing you're doing. I was thinking about this earlier today. I was thinking about this conversation today, and I was like, it really depends on like, if it's at Slack, I'd have engineers approach me, who are, early career engineers who are looking for mentorship and how to move up through the company. And a lot of that was really interesting because it was some of that like structural storytelling type stuff, but it was also like a career advice being like, when you operate in a company, a lot of it is like looking at the career ladder and looking at the expectations and looking at the work on the ground and helping them just like make sense of all the puzzle pieces as if it's like a board game. I think there is like, that is a form of mentorship. And I think in those cases, I am really looking forward to the engineers who probably I see a lot of myself in terms of like my interests, which have always been like, oh, there's an area of design and engineering that I'm personally passionate about. And I think those engineers kind of self-select too. And so there was something there in that type of mentorship. The other kind of mentorship though, and so in those cases, I think like that's really about like kind of career progression and really about like kind of helping someone kind of make sense of the larger puzzle pieces. I think the other form of that more casual or internal to external mentorship or I think more kind of like broader career type stuff. Patrick's also right. Like it's hard to structure those things. The way those typically work in my case is someone will reach out who has a similar vibe or sensibility or has seen something in my career that sparks them. I get a lot of those, and so obviously it's very hard to kind of like pick and choose. But I do look at everyone, and I try to have like 2 or 3 people that at any given point I'm kind of helping. And I think I do see, like as Patrick says, like that does kind of fizzle out. It's not like this formal thing. It's this thing where this person at this moment in time was trying to like course correct or figure a problem out or do something, and I helped them at that point in time. And we had regular meetings and it might have fizzled out. And then maybe they check in and it's like, crap, there's this other thing that's going on. And it reminded me of this. And then I might not hear from them again for a year, but like you see them along. That is what like the best of what LinkedIn is as a social network, is seeing those kinds of things rather than like thought leader things. So that it's just a way of saying, like, I think that in those cases, it's much more, I think it is more casual, but it's more about trying to help people kind of like steer themselves and give whatever insights you can, knowing that like all of us, especially as you get later career, like your calendars are a nightmare and life is a nightmare. I have a family too, and so my hours are very restrictive, and so I have to be very economical about how to be useful here. So I think it's nice that there's almost this like informal mentorship is a possible thing, and actually very common. I think probably more common for those if someone outside of your company.
That's awesome. How about you, Phil? Anything you'd add?
Yeah, I think Garrett and Kayla covered a lot of it. That there's a formal aspect, there's an informal aspect. Most of any of the mentor-mentee relationships I've been in have been rather informal. They've been very specific or subject or problem focused. I don't want to say problem, but a specific subject area focus. I think one thing that's really important is that you think about, as when you're looking for a mentor or being a mentor, even, what is your strength? What do you do well? Right. And then very specifically, what do I need help with? Not maybe a specific problem, but more of a specific subject area. This is, where I'm grasping at straws in a particular area. Can you help me fill in gaps? I think everyone said, respectful of time, of course, touch bases and meetings as appropriate, of course. And I think you've also got to have to, I think one of the things that has to happen, and I've always thought about it, it's kind of it's got to have a personality match as well, right? Someone who's willing to learn, someone who's willing to teach, someone who's willing to learn as they teach. And, and there's a definitely relationship there. I was thinking about it this morning as well, and I was like, it's kind of like looking for a doctor or a therapist, except you don't have to come up with insurance to pay for it, right? It's a little bit easier than that, but it's kind of, you got to find that person that matches your personality.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so I'm going to ask the hard question of the mentors, and this might be, maybe I'm causing more problems in the process of asking this question, but obviously when people are looking for mentors, it's hard. It's a challenge. It's a risk. Obviously, Patrick and Kayla have been able to take that risk, but you guys are busy. You have a lot going on. I'm sure there's a bunch of people reaching out to you. After this call, there's probably going to be even more reaching out to you. So what is the, when somebody's reaching out, what is the thing that you're looking for? I mean, you talked about kind of that personality match, or Garrett talked about even aligned passions, but what are you looking for in that outreach? What are the things, what's the secret sauce, I guess, for you to say, oh, this is somebody that I would actually entertain, connecting with? Go for it, Phil. We'll keep talking with you.
Yeah. Sure. I kind of want to know, I think I'll go back to that, the specific subject area that we're looking at, right? I want to know what I'm signing up for. Because I'm certainly happy to be in that role. I want to be that mentor. I want to help people. I don't want to sign up for a lifelong commitment. I'm not your therapist. I'm not your life coach. I'm not your career coach, but I can help in very small pieces, if that makes some sense, right? I want to see you succeed in all of those, but I just want to know kind of I guess, here we go. I'm gonna, go back to, we're all product folks, right? I want to know the scope of the problem, right? I want to know what question I'm answering, right? What problem am I solving? And that's kind of, and again, personality goes a long way too. It's just, people who operate in the same way I do, people who are flexible, people who, that's really the thing for me.
Yeah, awesome. How about you, Garrett?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's very much approaching it. And as you're saying this, you're making me realize like any kind of initial approach is mostly like, I need to borrow your time for 30 minutes. And that's basically the best you can hope for when establishing a mentor relationship. I think some of this is also just kind of like it's a soft interview for both people to be like, hey, maybe this is an interesting relationship, to that end, that there's a two-way relationship to form here. I think that's the only reason you'd continue it after that. And that two-way relationship could be just a moment in time for someone being like, I was looking for a person to throw some extra time towards, and this is it. But I think most likely it's, this person's like actually working on interesting problems that I as a human am curious about. And so this will be my reality TV, is getting to like live vicariously through this person and see how they solve these problems and help them on that. I think that a lot of like the least interesting outreaches to me are like, I am starting my career and you have the career that I want, so let's talk about it. It's like that's not going to be useful. Like, you can learn anything you'd learn in 30 minutes is probably already in LinkedIn, and like, here's the things I did. I think it's way more interesting to be like, I am an engineer. I have been doing this kind of work in my company. Like, I've done these kinds of calls specifically of like an engineer who's trying to get into project management, who's done some of that work already. Like, I can give tactical advice in 30 minutes to be like, oh, if you're already in your company, like, you need to do it this way. If you want to be a product manager another way, then you have to like start a different path. Like, there's very tactical ways that you just need to approach those kinds of things. So I think that's largely it. It's like, is this something that I think that will be a good use of our time? And I think for that to be true, the problem statement has to be a little bit more concrete than like, I really want to like do what you do. It's, I have met this specific point. I want to talk about like this kind of career progression. I want to become a senior. I want to change jobs. I want to change company sizes. Like, and I'm just trying to understand like, what is the difference to expect there? Things like that.
Got it. So saying not the direct message that asks if you want to make an additional 5K in your carear. Not that one.
Yeah, exactly. And not like, hey, do you want to mentor me for the next 6 months and tell me like have weekly meetings? It's like, hey, I got this weird problem. You seem like a person who might be able to solve it. And then like, it's a fishing, you're fishing. It's largely what you are doing in this, like mentor in the informal world. I think again, if you're internal, then a lot of the approaches is a lot more straight on, because you're allowed to be, because that's kind of part of corporate life is helping each other in our careers. So yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I'll jump to Kayla. In the process of looking for mentors, does this align with some of the approach that you've taken? Did you face any rejections in that process? How'd you navigate them? What are your thoughts there?
Definitely. If I'm reaching out to someone, especially if an external mentor, I'm trying to be really specific. I get like LinkedIn messages myself being like, oh, I think your career progression is really cool. Okay, like what part? Like, it's just so generic that I'm just like, I don't know how to respond to that. And like, I can't really help. So if I'm reaching out to someone, I'm super explicit. Hey, we're in the same community together. I see you did this. I'm super interested. Would you be willing to talk to me for 20 minutes about this? And sometimes like the form of rejection often on LinkedIn is just ghosting. And that's okay too. Like, I think a part of me, I used to be so cringe about it. Like, oh, this person didn't message me back, but I don't know where that person is in their career. They might not even check LinkedIn because they're taking a social media break. It's not personal. And like, you put yourself out there, and even them ghosting you, like, rejection is okay. And you'll find someone who resonates with your story, but not like getting so tripped up on that. I'd say that's the most important thing. So, but I also like, I don't send generic messages to everyone. Like, I'm really intentional. And I hope that with a really intentional message, it will resonate, but I don't know where that person is. So I just have to be respectful of their time as well.
Yeah. Great feedback. How about you, Patrick?
Yeah, I agree that there's not usually a like, no, you'll just not get answered. Like, you'll reach out and they won't answer. But when I reached out, I was always very specific about what I wanted to talk about. I never requested like, can we just talk about your career? Because That's not quite it. When I was in this stage, I was trying to get into product management. I was even more specific than I'm trying to get into product management. I'm trying to get into product management. I'm evaluating these certifications. Which ones resonate in your industry? Or can you talk to me about why you would value one over another? And then later in my career, I'm looking at moving from this company to another company. In your experience, like, how does that impact other people's career trajectories? I'm working in a B2B company. I'm looking to move to a B2B company in healthcare. Is that going to pigeonhole me? Will I be able to move back? Like, do y'all, in your experience, has that happened? But like very specific things that someone can either evaluate and say, I have no idea, so I can't help you. Because I have gotten that response before where I've reached out and they were like, I don't know. That's not really me, even though that you think it looks like me. I don't know, right? Like, I reached out to someone who worked in YouTube their whole career. They're like, never worked in B2B. I can't help you on that side. I've always worked B2C. And that's sometimes just the way it goes. But I think being very specific about what your ask is and what you're trying to achieve. And then in my history, I always try to put like what I've already done as like a building point, so that it's like, sometimes it's going to be like, you're the first person I've reached out to. I'm just trying to get information. A little bit like, I guess we're all kind of product managers and think this way. It can be, when you're trying to define the problem a little bit, sometimes it's a wider question, but the more specific you can be on, what you're doing, what you've done, and what you're trying to do is probably the most likely way to get a response. And then there's definitely an element of luck, because the person needs to be in the right frame of mind, have the right availability. Yeah, so there's definitely an element of luck.
I would say something also that goes a long way is asking for an introduction. So if I wanted to reach out to Garrett and I had a common connection, and I actually knew this connection, I'd be like, hey, Phil, I really want to talk to Garrett. Like, could you introduce me? Maybe Phil responds where it's like, oh, we went to a random event together. I don't actually know Garrett, so I wouldn't feel comfortable. Oh, cool. Thanks. No problem, Phil. But in one of my previous mentors, he reaches out to me and he's always like, hey, there's someone who's looking to get into product. Can I send them your way? And it's always a yes, because he helped me so much. I always want to pay it forward, but that means a lot versus this person randomly reaching out to me. Getting that intro, it kind of validates that this is worth my time.
That's awesome. I love that. Cool. I also like the idea of even asking, hey, if you're not a fit, do you know somebody? So even if the person's like, hey, I've only been at YouTube, hey, cool, do you know anybody that you think might be a better fit that you could point me to? Then you can almost turn that into that referral. That's awesome. Okay, so back to the mentors. What have been some of your favorite mentee relationships? What were special about them? What were unique? What did you feel like made those relationships the most positive? Why don't we start with you, Garrett?
For me, I think the most rewarding are still probably the earliest ones. And so those are all, I know we're product managers, but the engineers, especially this early stage engineers, I've seen a lot of them actually are went farther than I ever did with engineering management even. And so it's just amazing to see that. I think there's one person in particular who was a peer engineer. And as we were kind of growing this team together, I became kind of the default manager and leader, and I was just further along in my career and a little bit more confident at that point. But it's really interesting because that person, as I was getting ready to leave Slack, I was becoming a parent, and I was kind of in a good life transition point. And I was trying to stop being an engineering manager because I wanted to be a dad manager. And I was I felt really obligated to my team. And it was just this great opportunity where this person who I had been mentoring and working with all this time was able to also just basically take my job. And so I left for paternity leave and I came back and they were running the team, and I 2 months later was able to leave the company in a very happy place. It's not often that you get to fully disappear into the bushes as elegantly as I was able to, and that's largely because of just that mentor relationship. And since that point, getting to live vicariously through their career has been just awesome because they're still killing it.
That's awesome. How about you, Phil?
Wow. So I have two that come to mind. One was someone who came to me. They were on a PIP, on a performance improvement plan, and just really didn't know what they didn't know. And spent some time just kind of, yeah, this was a person who was, on that path to get fired, and this was someone who worked with me. I guess I'd say we have that mentor-mentee type relationship for maybe about 6 months. Next review was much better, but this person figured out that he was in a product management role, but that wasn't his passion, and was able to make a lateral move in an organization into a different department, and was just thriving. But it just kind of needed someone else to tell you. I guess he needed someone to talk with him to say, you figure that out. The other one that comes to mind was I joined a startup once, and it was a very, very junior team, and I just had one of the team members come to me and just say, hey, I don't know, I have a product management title, I don't know what that means, this is what I've been doing, this is how I've been working. And I said, okay, you've been a project manager, let's talk through this and figure this out. And what thrills me right now is this person is now a senior director at a different company. I see her post constantly on LinkedIn, and she's a thought leader. She's speaking at conferences and promoting all kinds of great stuff. And I have that little bit of moment like, yeah, I was there at the beginning. As I was saying before, there's a little bit of selfishness, a little bit of intrinsic, like I see her success and I feel successful myself because of it.
That's awesome. Very cool. That's so interesting that one of your examples was the time that you mentored somebody out of product. But it's just so important that you're in the right spot, right? That you're following your passions, that you're aligned. That's awesome.
Yeah, cool. It was one of those. The full background was this was someone who had joined the company as an intern, and it was again a startup that had did not have a product management organization that was building one, and kind of as he transitioned from intern to full-time employee, said, you'll be the product manager. And he went, okay, great. That sounds awesome. I see all this cool stuff online about being a product manager. And now all of a sudden he's in, he goes, wait, I don't know how to do this. This is not what I studied in school. This is not what I did as an intern. This is, I'm just, and so it was a little, but it was very cool. Thanks.
That's awesome. Cool. How about you, Kayla? What would you add both from a mentor perspective and then also maybe transitioning into a new question would be from your perspective, what have been kind of the things that you've loved about the mentor relationships you've had? What have been the best? What made them the best? What do you look for?
I would say these relationships, I love kind of seeing the success stories, and I love being able to share like if a mentor gives me advice or coaches me on a presentation or helps me, if like a really good opportunity to work with a mentor is if you're trying to do a take home for a job interview, that is like, you have a vulnerable space where you can say, how can I knock their socks off? And being able to go back to them to be like, I nailed it. That is like such a good feeling on both ways, where they feel really fulfilled that they were able to help you. And then you feel really awesome in your capabilities. I would say like that's probably one of my favorite things about mentoring is just kind of that feedback, but it just being organic and not having too much pressure on it, I think is really important. Like Garrett mentioned, like maybe I don't talk to this person for a year, but there's no bad blood. It's just kind of like you're in different life places, or you really help that person in that aspect of their career at that point in time. And maybe they don't need to grow there anymore, and it's something else that they're seeking.
That's awesome. From the perspective of a mentee, what have you loved about the kind of mentors that you've worked with? What have been, maybe there's some specific examples, some that have been better that you've enjoyed? I
think I've really enjoyed mentors who've been able to, like, I've been very lucky that I've had people in companies who seek me out to be like, I see you have a potential here. I think you need to really work on ironing this out because it's holding you back. And like, that's amazing that someone went out of their way to give me that kind of feedback. And it's something that like makes you take pause to be like, oh, like maybe I do have a really big hole here that I should be thinking about. I've been very, very lucky in my career that I've had that. And I think it's steered me professionally and helped me get to where I am today. To someone to take who's super senior, is on fire all the time with their own meetings, to be like, hey, like Phil, I like, do you have 5 minutes? Or like, this is what I was thinking about when you were presenting. And then it's like, to be able to accept that without like your ego being shattered, I think is really important.
That's awesome. How about you, Patrick?
For me, it's definitely the team aspect. Like I feel like when you have a great mentor, you feel like you have a teammate more than like somebody telling you what to do. It's somebody who's coached. They're coaching, but they're also cheering you on. So again, I had two, but one, my first mentor was very much about getting into product, and was not in the company, but it was like really great when I landed my first like official product job to be able to send that email and be like, hey, we did it. Not just I did it. You helped me get there. We did it. Celebrate with that. And then, yeah, I think that's it. It's just kind of turning it into like a team sport, that you don't feel like you're alone. That I also think once you've started to establish a relationship, it gets easier to be vulnerable and acknowledge what you don't know. And once that relationship's there, it's really easy to start asking for help on specific things and say that. And then, yeah, just having that team, that network behind you.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, I'm going to go back to you, Phil. One of the common problems that I think a lot of product managers face is that when they're asking for feedback from their managers, typically they only get positive feedback or something super vague, like, we want you to be more strategic. And for whatever reason, managers suck at giving critical feedback. But I think this is a place where mentors can really jump in. How do you navigate that balance, right? You don't want to crush people, but you want to give them real critical feedback on ways to move ahead. How do you navigate that?
I think the most important thing there is whenever you're speaking about anything in that regard, you've got to speak objectively, right? We're talking about results. We're talking about events. We're talking about things that happened. We are not talking about you as a person. You as a person is not the topic. These are ways that we could make the next time this event occurs happen better. Right. And keep it very focused on that. There's also the very traditional thought, if you're talking about negative things, you talk about them first and then always end on a good note. Right. Yeah. And I think I just keep harping on it. That to me, it's the reminder of that conversation of we've got a personal connection. I think someone mentioned earlier, we're a team. And as a teammate, I want to be able to tell you the honest truth. And what's equally important is, as my teammate, I need you to be able to receive the honest truth. And that's got to go the other way too. In a relationship, that I've got to have you tell me you gave me bad advice, or your advice didn't work, or this is, or even tell me, this teammate mentor mentee relationship isn't working anymore. And that's all okay, because those are things that doesn't reflect on a person, but all objective things.
Yeah, awesome. How about you, Garrett?
Yeah, very much. I think the biggest point here is like radical candor. It's like such a corporate term, but I think that's largely what it is. It's uninteresting to beat around the bush. It's especially uninteresting, I think, Phil, you're touching on something, if they get defensive. It's like, okay, like, why are we here if you're going to argue with me? You have to hear my opinion. Whether this opinion is right or not is also not the point. It's like, this is my personal opinion, and like, this is how I think you could approach that. But it's completely uninteresting if you're not already kind of starting this from a point of honesty and just like kind of, I think there's a truth in that. I mean, the whole mentorship is, I think, especially within a corporate environment too, is kind of like letting someone in to, not just your professional life, but also like your emotional life at work. It's saying like, this is the work I'm doing, and this is how I feel about it. And I think that like largely a lot of what you're trying to do is like process those feelings and turn them into like actual productive output. That's what you're trying to do with your career and with everything. So I don't know, a lot of this is like, you need someone who you can be real with. That's why I think that relationship that I spoke about earlier was correct, because that person and I had such like, we started from trust because we were coworkers, like working together on things. And I think like, as we both at different times took on different, like at different points, we were both taking on the role of a manager, right? And like, that was really interesting. But that's all from like mutual respect and just ability to say what you feel safely. And obviously not like, and not trying to turn it into a debate, but rather a like, an opportunity to like wring this towel for as much knowledge as possible in the time that you have, whatever that is.
That's awesome. All right, Patrick, how have you remained teachable, and have you had any times where you got some feedback where it was a tough pill to swallow? Maybe you didn't respond awesome in the moment.
Yeah, I've definitely done that. Sometimes you just don't want to hear it. I'll just fully admit that, especially when you feel like you've progressed somewhere and they kind of tell you, no, you're not there yet. That's definitely the hard one. To, you know, for me, that was the one that was, you just have to take it on the chin and remember that they're not, if you have a good mentor, they're not there to like just put you down. They're not just saying something to put you down. It's, you know, there's an aspect of trust. But yeah, I've definitely had moments where I had to stop, or I had to be stopped from arguing with said person. I'll be completely honest. They had to tell me, like, this isn't really something we're going to talk about. Like, I'm telling you something, you can decide to grow on it or not. So yes, I've definitely been guilty of not wanting to hear less than stellar feedback. It's just, I think it's part of life. It's part of growing in your career or growing as a person, is hearing things you don't want to hear and having to also acknowledge that you just have to keep working on it. Yeah, it's not easy. That's all I can say about it. It's just not easy. You have to get over it. You got to swallow the pill and then keep moving. That's all there is to it. Yeah.
Sounds good. How about you, Kayla? How have you handled the tough feedback?
I have zero poker face. So this has been a part in my career that I've really struggled with. And this has been something that, as I've gotten more senior, I've had to do a lot of work and a lot of therapy to try to manage this, because you're going to get feedback you don't like, but you can only control your reaction to it. And it took me a really long time to recognize, if I'm showing an expression or I'm really passionate in general, that it might be getting perceived that I'm really defensive. And I don't want that, because then I don't win. They're not going to give me feedback again because they don't think I'm listening, etc. So I think I've done a lot of work to recognize my cues and to recognize in my body language, like, I just need to sit with this. And if someone's giving me feedback, like, thank you, like, can I sit on this? And then nothing is wrong with you taking a day to think on it, maybe like venting to your partner about it, and then coming back when you're not so heated to be like, okay, what can I do to like make this better? So that has been not easy. This has probably been one of my biggest things in my career that I've had to work on, because I don't know, as you get more senior, I think being more stoic or being able to take these hard feedback, or when someone's expressing their upset with you, you have to kind of remain calm and collected, because if you show this huge expression, then you make them uneasy too.
I love the idea of saying, hey, can I take some time to process that? Because you're right, you can't always react perfectly in the moment. Nobody loves getting hard feedback, and I think that is a phenomenal feedback for the group. So awesome. Okay, so I'm going to flip it back to you, Phil, and I'm going to ask a not fun question. So
Oh boy.
It's very clear feedback is a gift. Sometimes that gift is not received well. Sometimes that gift is thrown back in your face. I want to know, we've kept it largely positive here. What are some of the like worst case scenarios? Obviously, mentorship doesn't always go awesome. You know, obviously don't use names, protect anonymity, but give us some examples of when has this not worked for you, or what's just maybe somebody approached you in a really nasty way, just turned you off. Tell us some of that.
Oh, wow. Wow, that is a hard question. Tough one. You know, I'd like to pass for a moment, give some time to think on that one. But, if someone else would like to hop in and give an answer while I try to recollect a good story here.
Sure, Garrett, you have a nasty experience.
Yeah,
We can give
I can give some. I've had a few where there are folks who I've from external who've reached out. It's always been external who've reached out, and I've taken a few calls where the mentorship angle was, it was kind of clear to me that they didn't actually have like the experience or the angle that they're kind of approaching from. It was more like everything was optimistic. So that was one piece. There's others where that's kind of happened, but it's also turned into a sales call where it's like, well, if like you can't really necessarily help me with that, like I also have this like problem that, you know, I'm trying to solve with work, and maybe you can connect me with some people, you know, wherever I was working at the time. And it was just like things like that where it's like, you know, everything's a sale, I guess. But there's definitely things like that have probably really readjusted. That was like earlier on when I was like, oh, maybe I could be more useful to more people and seeing those places. And I think I corrected my temperature gauge a little bit more, to be a little bit more discerning and you know, just update that. So nothing malicious, just kind of I think that like if you ever want to if you find yourself misaligned with a person that you've reached out to, potentially, like, don't try to turn a sales opportunity. Just know that like, hey, there's always time on this planet for people to reconnect and find new opportunities again. So yeah.
Oh man, that's rough.
Wow.
Yeah, can you help me with this? If not, do you want to buy some Cutco knives? That's a surefire win to mentorship. All right, Phil. Any nasty stories?
You know, while Garrett was talking, I was thinking that the only ones that I can come up with, none of them have been internal. You know, there've never been a nasty internal to a company issue. All of in the few, very few that I've had have been external, and it's been really that I think the connection hasn't been honest or forthright, right? It's someone who says, you know, I'd like to connect and learn, or you know, get a mentor relationship, or have you consult with me, or meet you for whatever. However, it's either a loose guise for just, you know, give me a job at your company, and that's it, or Cutco knives, or, you know, my company does, you know, has gallons and gallons of market research out here that we could sell you, and, you know, I'm like, but so it's always just that kind of misrepresentation of what the relationship actually is. And like I say, they've always been external. But I think like Garrett says, I feel I've become more discerning. I'm able to weed those out faster, which may be why it was hard to even come up with the examples right now.
Yeah. All right. How about you, Kayla? Have you had any negative experiences or opportunities where you kind of had to end a mentor relationship, or you felt like the situation wasn't positive?
Definitely. I think when you're mentoring, it's like you have this safe space where I'm meeting with someone, or I'm looking for someone where I'm making myself vulnerable. And everyone's got stuff going on, but if you can't spend 15 minutes to just have a conversation with me, and you're typing and like, oh, could you repeat that? Like, it just makes me uncomfortable. And then it's kind of like I feel weird here. So I've had situations like that where I've tried to reach out to someone, and it's like, it's clear that they weren't in a place where they could hold space for me, where I was kind of like, okay, like, I'm going to take a step back now, because I don't feel like this is genuine, or like they're not in a place where they can help me with my growth. And like, that's okay. But that's kind of been situations that's happened to me, where I've had mentors who are just like, they're not in it, and that's okay. But like, if you're not able to hold space, then like, it's okay also to just be like, hey, like, Kayla, I can't do this today. Like, I'm on fire. Like, could we reschedule? I'd rather that than you show up and not pay attention.
How have you navigated those conversations? Because obviously that's kind of uncomfortable. You're asking for somebody and they show up and they're not really fully present. Did you stop it in the moment? Did you follow up after? How did you handle it?
I literally have asked people like, hey, like, I see that you're focusing on something else. Like, do you need the time? Like, I'm happy to talk to you another time. And then sometimes they're like, oh no, Kayla, like, I'm sorry. Like, let's talk now. Or other times they're like, oh no, it's okay. And then they just continue the conversation and multitask that. It's like, okay, that's fine. But sometimes like having that reminder, or someone being like, hey, or like, we can reschedule. Like, it's okay if you have other stuff going on. Just that reminder helps them. Oh crap. No, I need to be here. I need to focus.
Yeah. Yeah. Great feedback. How about you, Patrick?
I don't know if I've had anything quite that negative. As I've really only been a mentee in this sense. Most of my negative experiences were just people who just didn't have the time, but were generally pretty polite about it. my most negative experiences were probably around feedback and just not things that ended relationships or anything like that, but just having to swallow that pill or acknowledge some. I mean, for me, the hardest ones was when you felt like you grew somewhere and they had to tell you that you didn't, that you didn't quite get as far as you thought you had gotten. Those sometimes can devolve into a little bit negative spaces. I've definitely had the moments where I was like, maybe this isn't worthwhile to me anymore. But usually that was just a reaction to what I was hearing and not really hearing it. So I've been fortunate that I haven't had anything quite as negative or off-putting in that sense.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. All right, I'm going to go to you, Garrett, as we wrap, and I'll go to each of the mentors and mentees with this quick question. But as we close, kind of in closing, 2 quick things. What is the one thing that you would recommend to mentees that they do? And what is the one thing you'd recommend they do not do, either in initiating a mentor relationship or becoming a mentor?
Yeah, I think I said this earlier, but the best advice I have is I have a concrete and probably more importantly interesting problem. I think that's just like that's the fishing lure. That is the thing that will draw us from our busy calendars into the 30-minute call with you. So I think it's the biggest thing, and I think the biggest thing not to do is I think don't come in with like mixed intentions. I said this as like negative thing, but I think there is this kind of like, if you're approaching mentorship because you want a job at that company, like those are 2 different problems to solve. And I think that's actually the wrong format if you're trying to get a job at the company to take that approach. So just like approach it from the right strategy. So I think it's like, have an interesting problem. And I say like more concretely, like don't come in with just like a bunch of other potential things that you could be getting out of this person. Like make use of this time. It's a gift, and be really deliberate.
Awesome. How about you, Phil?
Yeah, I like the specific problem, of course, but I rather than rehash that answer, I'll just say, yeah, come in with some being open and have some, be humble, have some humility, ready to accept feedback, right? And then the thing not to do is, of course, marries with that, and it's don't answer everything with, well, yeah, I was doing that, but, or I hear you, but. Yeah, not everything that you hear has to have a reply. Not everything that you hear needs a response. Sometimes just sit, listen, and be willing to accept that feedback without rebuttal.
Yeah, so good. All right, Patrick, how about you?
Yeah, so I'll mirror it with the specific ask is, I think, important to getting responses, but then also not having some specific expectation. Like even a 30-minute call may be a lot to be asking for from someone. Sometimes just asking for a response to an email with specific questions or recommendations is your best bet. Don't come in expecting them to, book an hour or even book 30 minutes. There's, especially if it's external to the company. Internal to the company, I guess there's a little bit more of an expectation there, but if you're reaching out external, like you need to be prepared to just take whatever they're willing to give. And even if that's not really what you were hoping to get. So being very open to saying like this, an email response is sometimes really great, and being happy to just say, hey, we can just communicate via email. Which is sometimes the easiest way to get responses from people, or, through LinkedIn messages for things. And then continuously, if they do have that connection, staying consistent with updates and what you've done, and showing that you're there as well. If they spent time to, send an email response, send a thank you, what you're going to do and how you'll, continue to work on that, I think is the most useful way to start a mentorship relationship as the mentee.
Awesome. All right, Kayla, take us home.
They all said great points. Last thing that I would add to this is just be respectful of each other's time. Like stuff comes up, life comes up, but like show up if you meet with someone or you say they're going to call them. Like not showing up, like you just waste their time. I could have talked to another person and I chose to talk to you. So that would be the last thing. Like that's another thing that like puts a sour taste in my mouth. If I meet with someone and then they don't respect my time, it's like I'm immediately turned off from helping them. And like, especially like things come up, it's okay, we're human, but like apologize, be humble. But if there's not that acknowledgement, like maybe I don't need to help.
Oh yeah, such good feedback. Thank you everybody for taking the time to join us. This has been awesome. Thank you mentors. Thank you mentees for sharing your feedback. Max, anything to close with before we wrap?
Just thank you to you, BJ, and to all of our panelists and folks for popping in and see what's Slack.
Awesome. Thanks everybody.
Bye,
Have a
all.
great day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks all.
Bye, everyone.
All right, time to find out if this recording worked.